CCTA is located in San Francisco Bay Area, out in the East Bay of San Francisco Bay Area. We're approximately about 1.2 million people here in Contra Costa County. And I think one of the unique things about Contra Costa County Transportation Authority is we actually manage and own one of the largest secure autonomous vehicle test beds in the country. And through that test bed, we're able to really leverage a lot of the technologies that we're using in testing at Gomentum Station and all of our projects. And some examples of that is CCTA was one of the first agencies to import a level 4 shared autonomous vehicle into the United States, working with US DOT and California DMV. Also, we were able to get an exemption through piece of legislation that we sponsored, AB 1592, to actually operate the shared autonomous vehicle on public roads, the first of its kind in California. And so through those projects like that, we were able to really address really critical problems and solutions in Contra Costa County. And you'll hear more about this as we get into the presentation, but it's really looking at our first and last mile problem that we have here in Contra Costa County. We are a suburban county. And so most people are driving to get to BART, our rapid transit system here in the Bay Area, as well as to transit stops, as well as, points of interest, grocery stores, movie theaters, et cetera. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of what we do at CCTA. We deliver programs and projects, anything from a small construction little project like a walking or biking project, all the way to a large capital improvement project. And some of the programs that we've delivered over the years are for, funding of transit, funding of buses, as well as Safe Route to Schools, Vision Zero for safer walking and biking, as well as programs for senior and disabled and veterans in Contra Costa County. Next slide, please. So over the course of Measure J, we have delivered about $5.4 billion in construction projects here at Contra Costa County Transportation Authority. We do deliver and construct all of our projects. Some examples of that is Caldecott Tunnel. It was a $419 million project, and we actually were able to deliver it under budget on time at $417 million. Some of our other recent completions are the improvements on I-680. We were able to finish that project 1 year ahead of schedule and $2 million under budget. And some of the other projects, particularly to East Contra Costa County, is a $1.2 billion investment to modernize Highway 4, widen Highway 4, as well as extend BART out to Antioch, which is also Antioch and Pittsburgh are some communities that will be better served by the dynamic personal microtransit project. And so we're really proud of this. And if you go to the next slide, we have really a historical nature of leveraging our local dollars to every amount possible. By taking $1.4 billion of Measure C and Measure J dollars, we've been able to attract $4.2 billion of state, regional, federal funds. We were just recently received 2 federal grants, innovation grants. One was an automated driving system grant. We were the only local agency out of 8 recipients in that award. We also received an advanced transportation congestion management technology deployment grant just recently. And out of that award, out of the 14, we're also the only local agency. So CCTA not only has a huge presence here in California, known for innovation, but also a huge presence nationally and also internationally as we deliver innovative projects like the one we're going to talk about today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeannie Krieg to talk a little bit about TriDelta Transit and some of the great innovative things they're doing in East Contra Costa County.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Tim. TriDelta Transit is a JPA, Joint Powers Authority, that was formed in 1977 to serve the 225 square mile region of Eastern Contra Costa County. It's about a little more than a third of the county. We're a mostly suburban, some rural area, and we were formed to provide a public transportation service to the citizens in Eastern Contra Costa County. Before the pandemic, about a third of our ridership were commuters that we delivered to the BART system. Another third were school children, and another third were those taking local trips within Eastern Contra Costa County. Prior to the pandemic, we were providing close to 3 million, but a lot of trips to our population of about 315,000 folks. The majority of our funding comes from state and local sources. We do get some federal funding, but we contract our services. So we have about 250 employees, and of those, about 150 are contract employees. Those are the operators and the dispatchers and so on. So that is TriDelta Transit.
Thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate it. TriDelta Transit has been a really great partner in this process, as I mentioned, getting to this point. And really, it's Contra Costa County in itself is really a very diverse, unique county. I would say that East Contra Costa County is also unique in terms of, as Jeannie was just mentioning, it's really part of our more suburban and more even rural area of Contra Costa County. This project really is supposed to integrate the smaller communities, and in some cases, some of the bigger communities too, in East Contra Costa County, Pittsburgh, Antioch, Oakley, Brentwood, and portions of unincorporated Contra Costa County. If you go to the next slide, please. So of that, there are about 300,000 residents in East Contra Costa County, which pretty much makes up about close to 20%, 30% of our overall population here in Contra Costa County. The average age is fairly young, and I think the important thing here is it's a really diverse community. It really has a lot of essential workers that are looking to really commute to those essential businesses and places to get around in East Contra Costa County and, quite frankly, the rest of the Bay Area. So some of the goals that we really wanted to pursue as part of this project is really looking at how we can better leverage, public and expand public transportation in Contra Costa County. So how we can better get access to transit. Jeannie's been operating just a really successful bus system in Eastern Contra Costa County. We also have BART stations, and BART is really a lifeline in East Contra Costa County. Transit is a lifeline in East Contra Costa County. And so, for example, at the Antioch BART station, that parking lot would fill up. This is obviously pre-pandemic levels. But that parking lot would fill up by 6 a.m. I mean, that's the amount of people that are using these services out there. And the other component of this is that when we first opened up eBART, the extension of BART out to Antioch, within 6 months, we actually met all of our 5-year projections in terms of ridership in East Contra Costa County. And so with that being said, we need to have a better system of how to get people to the BART station, to these points of interest in East Contra Costa County to really help support economic development, these essential workers, and really getting people to these communities. In these communities, each of them have their own unique downtown areas that people are trying to get to and really have their own attractions within themselves. And we're really trying to really connect all that way together and to get better access to all of those different parts of the Eastern Contra Costa County. I think another big goal of this is really providing those first and last mile connections. East Contra Costa County is as much as it's about 300,000 people, it does cover a large kind of geographic area. And so really we want to make sure that we're able to solve those first and last mile connections. And that was really how we really developed this project, developed the routes of this project to really provide, better access in itself within Eastern Contra Costa County. Next slide, please. So we started this whole process really working with our East Contra Costa County cities, some of the ones I mentioned, Pittsburgh, Oatley, Brentwood, Antioch. And they wanted to really embrace this concept of first and last mile. And so we started this feasibility study of what would be some of the viable options that would really help get to meet our goals relative to first and last mile and access. And so through this feasibility study, we wanted to assume something that had a smaller vehicle because we do have constraints along some of these corridors, and we weren't necessarily thinking about trying to take essentially a whole lane of traffic.
Yes, I'm sorry. I want to call and I'm calling you back right now.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I just wanted to tell you. Are you able to?
So as part of this process, we weren't looking to take essentially a whole lane of traffic. We really wanted to really focus on a really smaller type vehicle that could run parallel to a roadway, parallel to a trail, and really fit into some of these more constrained type places to really have low infrastructure cost, as well as potentially less in terms of right-of-way needs in order to run a dedicated space like we're planning for this project. I think the other thing is that we wanted to learn how we wanted to pursue this project. We wanted to learn what the process was going to be to pursue this project. And that was the other purpose of the feasibility study, which really kind of led to this potential procurement, this potential P3 procurement. And so as we move into these next stages, these next phases, I know that you'll read the feasibility study and see a lot about glideways, but by no means we are not requiring the glideways technology as part of this procurement. We are really open in looking for any type of technology that really meets the goals of the project. It really meets the project requirements as we kind of move into these next phases for procurement. So I think, Joy, this is where you pick it up.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So I'll be talking about the feasibility study and what we did as part of the feasibility study and what was our finding. As Tim mentioned, the feasibility study was a collaborative study that was conducted, and all the cities in the East County participated, including the city of Oakley, Pittsburgh, Brentwood, Antioch, TriDelta, CCTA, and Contra Costa County were major part of it. And the purpose of this is to basically understand whether there is a potential of deployment of a DPMT network in East County area. And the purpose of this was not to take away any trips from the existing transit, but to provide a complementary transit network that can provide a better connection for the commuters, and that can be provided through a personalized, congestion-free, and a safe system. So that was the overall purpose of the feasibility study, and that is what we started with. Next slide, please. So in this slide, as I mentioned, like the feasibility study was a collaboration between all the cities, and the existing roadway system, the regional highway access that is provided to the East County includes the State Route 4, which is the major highway that extends east-west through the region, providing the regional connection. In addition to that, there is the BART that Tim mentioned with the 3 stations in the East County area. In addition to that, there is also the Amtrak Sandwalking line, which provides connection to the Central Valley. And then we have the TriDelta Transit that provides both fixed route as well as on-demand services in that area. So we took all of them into account, and we also looked at the statistics, which says that the drive alone is around 71%. So most of the people are driving alone in this area, and there is a huge potential of moving the drive alone cars and moving the drivers into transit. And that was what we have looked into. And we did not consider moving public transit that are already using public transit over to the DPMT services. Moving to the next slide. So this is the potential outcome or the conclusion from the DPMT study, which basically states that there is a huge potential that the DPMT could support economic development and create jobs in this area. And this could be done by increasing the mobility and connectivity in the area. That way there will be much easier access to businesses, and that would lead to the economic growth. The second thing that we found is that congestion relief, there could be converting the vehicle trips to transit trips, and that in turn will be reducing the congestion as well as the vehicle mile traveled on the State Route 4. The third thing that we noticed is that it would provide much increased access for the undeserved communities in this area. And this could be provided through the first mile, last mile connection. So people who are using BART will have an option to be able to access the undeserved community using the first mile, last mile connection that will be provided by the DPMT. So overall, what we found that DPMT might be a very cost-effective and scalable solutions, and it is definitely environmentally sustainable. It's all electric cars, autonomous cars, so there is no effect on the environment. And the other thing that is an advantage of DPMT is that the deployment process is much quicker than a light rail system or any other transit systems on rail. Moving over to the next slide. So the overall goals and objective of the project that we started with very simple, 3 simple goals for this DPMT implementation process. So basically the first goal was to provide transit accessibility by building a DPMT system to provide first mile, last mile connections. That was one goal. The second goal was to provide transit accessibility to assure economic development and attract employers. And the third goal was to evaluate the feasibility to attract potential public funding and private funding. So as Tim mentioned, that we had to assume one technology to be able to really analyze and do the feasibility impact, our feasibility study. So we had used glideways technologies for the planning purposes, but that is just for the feasibility study and planning purposes that we could show the benefit of a DPMT implementation. Moving to the next slide. So this just shows the conceptual route alignment that was developed. And this was developed based on feedback that we had received from all key stakeholders in the East County. So we went and met with all the cities and we developed this overall alignment. However, this alignment is not set in stone. There is still ways that it could be modified in order to reduce the right-of-way needs and other things. So the way we did it is we basically talked to the cities, and the main thing was how we can best connect all the residential communities, connect to the medical centers, the institutions in this areas, different businesses, and also the future maybe residential as well as industrial development in this area. So we basically tried to connect all the major development zones, areas, and we also basically had a continuous path that the DPMT can provide access to all these major developments that are existing as well as planned, and provide a continuous route through the study area. And the ones that you see as dashed line in this corridor, those are the alignments that are there, which could be like in the future that it becomes available as we move forward. So those were not considered as part of this study. Moving on to the next slide, please. So this shows the transportation services in East County, which includes the BART, the Amtrak, as well as the bus routes. And overlaid on top of that is the DPMT alignment and the boarding zones. As you can see, most their boarding zones are pretty close to each other, and that is because we need to provide better accessibility to the users. And that is why it's close to each other. And as you can see, it is providing connection to the major BART station, the 3 BART station that you see in the blue pointer, and also the Amtrak station at Antioch, Pittsburgh. So it's providing access, and it's basically complementing the existing transit options. Moving on to the next slide. So now we'll talk a little bit about how this ridership estimate was done. So what we did is we overlaid this route alignment and the boarding zones on a census map. And we considered the population which is within the 0.25 miles from all the boarding zones. So we did not go beyond the 0.25 miles because 0.25 miles is the approximate distance that people will walk to a DPMT boarding zone to be able to use DPMT. There could be others that bicycle there, but for this study, we limited it to people who are walking to the stop to take the DPMT services. With that, what we did, we looked at the longitudinal employer household dynamics, which is called the LEHD data, which provides a lot of information about the employers and the households that are living in that area. So with that, we could understand how many people are living in the study area and actually working outside the study area that could benefit from this DPMT services. Then we also looked at how many people live outside the study area but work in this area. So that will also be the commuters that are using it. It also includes like a lot of information about the overall dynamics of all the people who are living within the study area. So with that, we could separate the trips into work-based trips and the home-based trips. And with that information, it also provides, LEHD also provides the current mode choice for these home-based trips and work-based trips. So whether they are driving alone, whether they are using public transit, carpooling, biking, walking. So with that information, we were able to get like what is their mode of transportation currently. And then we use the logit model, which is basically an understanding of how it will shift based on parameters like travel time, waiting time, as well as the travel cost. So we put in all these parameters to see if there is a better option available, what percentage of people will shift their mode from existing drive alone or carpooling to a transit option. So that is what we did. Logit model is practically used for all personal rapid transit projects that has been studied for feasibility analysis. And it is also the major modal shift tool that is used for any travel demand modeling. So we use the same tool, but we did not use the actual elaborate travel demand modeling, which takes a long time and a lot of effort. So that is how we came up with the potential ridership, which is expected to be approximately around 30 million riders per year. But we understand that when there is a lot of people who are driving alone are shifting over to riding transit, then there is a potential that the congestion goes down. And as soon as the congestion goes down, more people might be attracted towards driving, right? So it is an iterative process. And there could be that the potential demand is lower because the congestion has reduced. So we just took a very conservative approach. And instead of doing the iterative process, we said that conservatively, if we say that there will be 7 million riders, which is almost half of the potential demand, that is something that is supportable. So that is what we are portraying here, is that the demand is going to be approximately 7 million per year. In the next slide. So this is just to give a perspective, as you can see here, that SR4 on an annual basis carries 52 million. So that is the amount. So what we are saying is that there will be a shift of approximately 7 million out of those 52 million that will shift over and maybe start using BART and use DPMT to provide the first mile, last mile connection. To the next slide. So this is just showing how a complete street, which will take people from their origin to destination. So it would be that they will have the initial connection providing the first mile, last mile, and then it could be a BART that they use, or it could be a transit bus from TriDelta, or it could be the Amtrak that will provide the overall connection, the complete connection between the origin and destination of all users. Moving on to the next slide. And this is the cost, the planning level cost. And we have estimated it and separately for the 3 different segments. One is for the Pittsburgh segment, Antioch segment, and the other segment we combine Oakley and Brentwood together. So it shows the overall cost. We assumed where there will be the elevated segments and where it will be at grade, and breaking it down we got that for this 11.4 miles, the total estimated capital cost is $450 million. Next slide, please. These are some of the assumptions that we have made for the feasibility study. The hybrid transportation system has to be proven in other cities with varying success. And the DPMT system features is it has to provide a direct origin to destination service. It has to be fully automated vehicles and electric automated vehicles. Has to have an on-demand service. It cannot be a fixed route, fixed schedule kind of a service, available 24/7. It needs to be low cost, and it would be on exclusive guideways. Moving to the next slide. Is this my slide, or this is where we change it over?
This is still yours, Joey.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So this is the system parameters. The system to consist of a fleet of driverless electric vehicle on demand, as we stated in the previous slide. It has to be electric, it has to be on demand, it has to be autonomous. It will connect the residential, medical, institutional, and business centers. That is how we came up with the routes for the feasibility study. And we got that information by talking to all the cities that are involved, all the major stakeholders. So it would be very like either similar route or pretty close, but the overall goal is the same, is to connect all the high demand locations that has the potential of trip generation, right? It has to provide access to undeserved communities, and we actually laid down the PDAs and the undeserved communities in the area and saw to it that the route that has been, the alignment that has been selected kind of provides access to those areas from BART and Amtrak. It will include, of course, civil construction, procurement of proprietary systems and vehicle technology, and a subsequent operations and maintenance phase. So that's a typical process that needs to be and deploy as a program of related and coordinated projects. Next slide.
Thanks, Joy. This is Brian Petzine. I'll take over from here. So far in the presentation, we've been talking quite a bit about the work that CCTA has done to date, the feasibility study, kind of the goals and what's been studied. I want to transition now to talking a little bit about the procurement and the project going forward. So what it is we're going to procure. We've talked a fair bit about the assumptions in the feasibility study, but specifically what it is we're going to be asking teams to bring to the table in the subsequent process, who we're looking for, the team itself, and then how we're thinking to do the procurement and ultimately deliver the project. So, you know, I think you've heard a lot about the technology. So I think it's important to emphasize that some of these key project parameters, you know, really will depend on the technology that we're bringing to bear here. So that's the real opportunity here, is to deploy a new technology in a new way. So these are parameters, but they're really goals. I think I also want to emphasize we're going to be doing a two-step procurement. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you know, we intend to enter into a system pre-development agreement with the selected teams, and we'll be requesting qualifications for those teams. It won't just be the technology, but with a strong emphasis on, you know, the technology and the team's concepts for delivering the project. And what we're hoping to get is, you know, similar to the system that was studied in the feasibility study. So on-demand service that can run 24/7. A really challenging but important one here is, you know, wait times less than 2 minutes for nearly all riders in the system. And we are contemplating, you know, single party rides, point-to-point service. So we're not currently thinking that this would be a shared service. We are going to be looking for fully autonomous operations, greenhouse gas neutral operations. And we do anticipate that the project will have federal dollars before it's all said and done. So, you know, Buy America compliance and full ADA compliance, of course. So something to keep in mind. In terms of operations, a lot of this, of course, will get worked out during the PDA phase of the project. But we do anticipate fully traffic separated operations, so not a system that operates in mixed traffic, directionally separated system as well. And ideally, given the financial realities of the project, I think we do want this to operate at grade as much as possible. So, other priorities here, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but this is sort of a proof of concept opportunity, as we've discussed. This is all about convenience for getting folks to other transit solutions in the East County. And scalability, when we talk about the delivery model a little bit more, I think the reality is this is probably not an all-at-once construction solution. And even if it is, the ability to expand it in the future is key, both from a transportation standpoint, but also for the long-term viability of the system itself. So something to keep in mind, and I think it's built into the delivery structure that you'll see, the ability to scale that and having somebody around to oversee and integrate various phases of the project. And I think it goes without saying that safety, environmental sustainability, carbon efficiency, these are priorities for CCTA. And fare policies, another point of discussion, I'm sure, during the PDA phase, but this really does need to integrate into the regional transit system. So fare structures and approaches that do that, also important. So on the delivery model, so it touched on this a little bit, but we do, again, expect a two-step procurement. The first step would select based on a combination of qualifications and technical vision, technology, kind of the concept that you want to bring to the table, because there could be very different concepts from very different teams. And from there, we do contemplate entering into what we're calling a system pre-development agreement, so PDA for delivery of the overall system. Entering into that PDA phase then, after execution of the SPDA, inherent within this is there's sort of a 1A and a 1B phase within the PDA phase that I want to point out, because really important is to help CCTA and TriDelta identify funding sources for the project, for planning and development efforts, and for ultimate delivery of the project. There's not currently an identified public source of funding, so the PDA phase is a combination of initially helping us to scope out the project and the feasibility of the project and identify a funding source potentially to even fund the remainder of that PDA phase. And during that phase then, we would hope to work with the selected team to, again, refine the approach. A lot of work has been done in the feasibility study, as you've seen, but there's still work to be done to identify which is an initial viable segment from a financial standpoint, which sources of grant funding are available. Everything's on the table, state and federal. There's going to be a lot of money out there, and we'll talk a little bit more in the legal structure about where those different sources could fit in, and any refinement on the approach and the cost estimates and the work that's been done to date, so that we can then transition into design and construction of the project itself. And at the conclusion of that PDA phase, assuming all goes to plan, once we've identified a financially feasible and operationally feasible project, we would enter into a system development agreement, which would then govern the subsequent project delivery. Okay, so I'm going to spend a minute on this slide. This is an anticipated delivery model. This is addressing a few very specific considerations that I want to talk through, and it's by no means set in stone. I think we wanted to put out a legally and hopefully practically and commercially viable path forward, but this is something that will be contemplated in the PDA and the RFP. But we're open to other ideas here as well. So right at the top, you'll see that CCTA and TriDelta, Tim alluded to this at the beginning, but TriDelta is the transit operator here in Eastern Contra Costa County. So this will be a joint procurement between both agencies. CCTA is not a transit operator, so they'll be working hand in hand through the entirety of the process. So Beyond that, then, we have the PDA, SDA, and the ultimate agreement. And we're showing 3 different project participants, and I'll talk these through. And really the reason for this, to be completely frank, is that CCTA, like many county and regional transportation authorities in California, does not have inherent P3 authority. But there are a number of legal authorities that CCTA and TriDelta do have that pick off the various portions of a full P3 delivery. And we think by breaking it up, which happens to align functionally with what a project of this nature needs, we think that those various authorities can altogether model what most of you would recognize as a typical P3 delivery. So first and foremost is the California Infrastructure Finance Act, which many of you may be familiar with, the IFA. So that is the primary P3 authorization, P3 law that CCTA would have available to it for financing and entering into a long-term contract, in this case, a 35-year contract under the IFA for, quote, fee-producing infrastructure, which transit is. However, the IFA also has some restrictions built into it, again, which some of you may be familiar with. And the most obvious one is that the IFA cannot be used for state-financed infrastructure. On the other hand, CCTA has various other legal authorities, including most obviously the design build law, that it uses all the time as its authority for construction of capital projects. So the structure that we're putting out there basically allows for the delivery of state-funded projects into the larger whole, and then the IFA could be kind of the umbrella over the whole thing that would enable the longer term contract. So again, we'll jump into this in more detail, but I wanted to explain up front why we have picked apart effectively a normal DBFOM structure in the way we have in order to enable this, what we hope to be a very innovative and creative project and delivery model at the same time. So within that, we've got what we see as the 3 major participants. So there's the P3 developer. That could be exactly what you think of as a P3 developer. There's a construction manager. That could be a contractor. That could be somebody else serving as oversight of various construction projects. And then because of the unique nature of the project itself, there's what we're calling a system technology partner. That would be the folks who bring the technology to bear, bring the software, bring the vehicles, et cetera. So just a little bit more about how we see these roles playing out. Again, open to flexibility on this, as always, but the P3 developer would be kind of the IFA component of the project. So the P3 developer could, of course, do any non-state funded work. Local and federal funding are fair game here. So to the extent there are projects that are not fully state funded, that could sit within the P3 developer bucket of the overall delivery. Vehicles and really operations, because the P3 developer and the IFA are the vehicle for taking fee revenues, in this case, fair revenues off the project, assuming revenue risk, we think is absolutely a part of this project, and integrating the overall design and systems and vehicle procurement and operations, and being the glue for the project capital P, the overall program, as different portions of the project come online. So the next is the construction manager, and this is really the role that would build the project, responsible for delivery, integration, maintenance. Maintenance can be broken out separately from operations. Again, it's a detail, but so that everybody understands why we've done it the way we've done it here. The construction manager, under different legal authorities, has much more flexibility. To the extent we identify state grant funding sources, to the extent we identify federal grant funding sources, the capital work to deliver the civil infrastructure and whatever else needs to be included to deliver a portion of the project can go under the construction manager. And we've intentionally not called this a contractor because we wanted flexibility for a P3 developer type to also play a role in the construction manager side of the house, but this could just be a large contractor as well. A lot of different ways to approach this. And this would be, of course, contracted outside of the P3 developer scope. Really, the functions and the roles in the project delivery, tracking the color of money considerations that we have to keep in mind. And lastly, the system technology partner, this is the backbone of the project, integrating multiple projects into a cohesive whole from an operational standpoint. So this is the portion of the team who we would expect to be responsible for the autonomous technology and implementation and integration of that program as a whole. So working potentially hand in hand and possibly not even separate from the P3 developer, I would think, but the P3 developer and the system technology partner make the whole thing work as a system while various elements of the project come online. So, also sits in the middle between the P3 developer and the construction manager. We anticipate that this team member would provide technical specs, for example, and provide common design and technology standards that apply to all of the other team members of the project. So again, we don't want to make this seem too terribly baked. So I think that's kind of enough for now on who the roles are, the major participants that we anticipate putting out there in the RFP and anticipate teaming with through the PDA phase. I think we all agree there's maybe some room for discussion about whether, for example, a construction manager is needed at the PDA phase while we scope out project feasibility and what it is we'll be building. Maybe the system technology and P3 partner are sufficient for that role, but this is kind of the starting point for the delivery structure that we anticipate moving ahead with. So I guess, Tim, any last parting thoughts? I guess I can do schedule. That's right. I can do. So here we are, early February, Industry Day. We will be doing one-on-one meetings today and over the next couple days with folks who've requested it. I'll just throw out there, to the extent you haven't requested and would like to have a one-on-one meeting to discuss any of this in more detail, just shoot us an email after the presentation. Happy to do that. We're currently anticipating around April, late spring release of the RFP, and this would be the RFP to enter into the system PDA. And then over the course of the summer, evaluating and selecting a team round about July. The goal being to actually execute the PDA agreement in September. Reason being, we don't have a board meeting in August. So I guess with that.
I appreciate it, Brent. This is Tim Hale again, the Executive Director of CCTA. And if you want to just advance to the next slide, please. I think we're ready to start the Q&A portion of the overall industry review day. But first, I just wanted to really express my gratitude and thank you for your interest in this project. I'm really impressed with the participants that we've gotten today. I know that Jeannie Krieg and I are excited about the opportunity about this project and what it can bring to East Contra Costa County. And really the magnitude of this project is really unprecedented. This would be probably the largest autonomous vehicle undertaking project in the country. And we're very familiar with what's happening across the United States relative to this space. And that's really exciting to be able to put this system in place for autonomous vehicles to provide an actual service will really help kind of put this industry in a trajectory that's positive so we can move to actual deployment. And so, again, really appreciate and thank you for your interest in the project. And I think we're ready to kind of move to Q&A. So maybe if you want to end your screen share. You push the video button. There we go.
Did I get it?
Yeah.
I don't have any way to close out of that though.
All right, so now we're transitioning here to Q&A, and I know that we've already received a few questions in the chat. And one second.
Get rid of that.
Go to screen share real quick, hit the green button, and just hit done. So we're ready to do the Q&A portion of this, and we're going to start with the first questions in the chat. And this first question is probably going to be for Joy. As part of the feasibility study, there's a question here about the ridership projections. The question is, are these projections influenced by a migration to a congestion pricing for vehicles within BART service area? So Joy, do you mind taking that question?
Sure, Tim, but I think I need a little bit more clarification on the question as to what Brian means by migration to a congestion pricing for vehicles within BART service area. But the way we did this feasibility study or came up with the ridership projection is we took into account the travel time, and we took into account the cost, and we also took into account the waiting time. So if the cost varies or the changes, then definitely it is going to impact it. Like if you're talking about congestion pricing in certain area, which could be in BART, or it could be a congestion pricing when people are coming in and out of San Francisco, or any kind of congestion pricing would definitely impact the overall thing. But what we need to do is when we are adjusting this ridership projection, we will have to take that into account and change the pricing model such that we get the real numbers when this congestion pricing model is implemented in the future.
Joy, there was a follow-up question. Is there a congestion pricing model being developed that is influencing the increase in ridership?
No, there has not been any congestion pricing model that has been developed as part of this study. It is all based on existing conditions, like whatever is the pricing structure now. We have assumed the same pricing structure for vehicular traffic as well as DPMT as well as BART to provide us the overall pricing that a person using BART currently is paying. And then we added this first mile, last mile to that to come up with the total trip cost. So we have taken into account everything that is currently in place.
Thank you, Joy. The next question in the chat is relative to equity. So do you have a vision of how the equity commitments in the federal funding going to impact the program design and delivery? I think that's a good question. As we all know, the current administration is really focused on equity as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And that's actually some of the reasons of why we chose East Contra Costa County. East Contra Costa County is very, very rich with priority equity communities. Both Pittsburgh, Antioch, and Oakley are all priority equity communities that will be serviced by this project. And so I think we will be able to really meet any requirements that would be put forward as part of any future grant opportunity from the IIJA. The next question is it expected that the same firm would be selected for both the SPDA and the PDA phases? And the answer to that question is yes.
And really firms, I think we'll be asking for some teaming on your end. It doesn't have to be 3 necessarily, but to make sure that all of the project roles that we've described are covered off in the team.
And the next question is, who would we reach out for a one-on-one? That's actually in the industry form solicitation. You can actually send an email to dpmt@ccta.net. The next question, and this is a question I think for Joy, would the demand responsive routing solution sit with the technology supplier or with the P3 developer? It might actually be a question for Brent and or Joy.
You know, I don't think we would have a prescriptive answer on that. I think it would, I mean,
I agree.
The negotiation on what routing looks like would occur during that phase, but who drives that as between the P3 developer and the system technology person? I think whatever makes the project work better, both from a financial and technical standpoint.
Yes, I agree with that. It completely depends on the solution that is being provided and which makes more sense.
The next question is, what kind of professional services are expected to be used by CCTA TriDelta in this process? I think as you can kind of indicate from the roles and responsibilities, I think we've outlined in the presentation, that's kind of our expectations. But again, we're flexible and open in terms of the professional services you like to provide. I think we're really looking for a turnkey solution and team in this, in terms of providing the necessary professional services to deliver the project.
I'll add, in case the question was a slightly different one, that I think on the CCTA side of the house, I think those roles are filled out on the owner side.
That's correct. The next question is to confirm the roles are as follows: P3 developer, construction manager, technology partner. That is correct. Those are the 3 confirmed roles.
And Tim, to confirm, we are going to make the slide deck available to the participants as well after this.
That's correct. Yeah, we will be posting this recording and the slide deck on our website under the procurement section of our website. I think those are all the questions. Any other questions? Oh, there's another one right there. This is a question: is there a priority on how and where DBEs will be able to participate in the respective project, verticals, development, CM, and technical solutions? It seems to me that the vision of providing sorry, I got to scroll down here, of a nation-leading autonomous vehicle having a robust and well-defined path for DB to gain skills and capacity to participate in this project. I think that's why we're really focused on the limited roles that we have right now in terms of the overall structure, and hopefully providing the flexibility in the future to be able to add, any necessary DBE services to respond to any potential federal grant opportunities. And so I think the idea is, really bringing on this core team early, assessing the financial feasibility of the project, and then we can determine how to build out the team based on that, depending on what available funding there is and what that initial project would actually look like.